All right, today we're going to dive into something that's, well, it's a feeling that's way more common than most of us admit, but we just don't talk about it much. And that's the painful, really confusing experience of being disappointed with God. So let's get right into it.
This right here, this is the big question, isn't it? It feels almost wrong, maybe even a little dangerous to ask it out loud. But what if the answer is yes? What if this exact struggle is actually a well-documented, maybe even a necessary part of a real, living faith?
This feeling isn't some new, modern problem or a sign that you've personally failed. Not at all. In fact, the Bible itself is absolutely filled with these raw, honest struggles. It doesn't try to airbrush the messy, emotional reality of its most faithful people.
I mean, just listen to this. This is a cry from King David. This is not some polite, tidy prayer. This is the sound of a heart in total anguish from a man of incredible faith who feels completely and utterly abandoned by the very God he trusts.
So what's going on inside David here? Well, it breaks down like this. On one side, you've got his core beliefs about who God is, that he sees, he cares, and he shows up. But on the other side, his actual day-to-day experience feels like the exact opposite. And that massive disconnect, well, that's the engine driving all his pain.
And this brings us to a really important idea we're going to call the gap. This isn't about doubting that God exists. No, it's about wrestling with his seeming absence, his silence, right when we need him most. This gap is the fertile ground where disappointment takes root and just grows.
And if you're wondering just how normal this is, get this. Over a third of the Psalms in the Bible are what you'd call prayers of lament. They're full of confusion and grief and honest-to-God complaints. And here's the kicker. God didn't edit these out. He kept them in his book. That fact alone tells you so much.
You see this feeling pop up again and again, and it's almost always triggered by these same things. Promises that seem delayed forever, prayers that feel like they're hitting the ceiling, suffering that makes no sense, and that crushing divine silence. Think of Abraham, David, Job. Their stories are full of this stuff.
Okay, but this is where we have to be really, really careful, because there's a world of difference between an honest struggle with God and a prideful judgment of God. The Bible draws a very sharp line in the sand between the two.
See, a lament happens inside the relationship. It's faith under pressure, crying out, God, I don't get this at all, but I'm not going anywhere. Accusation, on the other hand, steps out of the relationship, puts on a judge's robe, and basically says, God, you failed. You are wrong. One's a desperate cry for connection, the other is a verdict. So how do you know if you're starting to cross that line? Well, there are some pretty clear warning signs to watch out for. It's when that disappointment starts to harden, when you start judging God's actual character, when you find yourself pulling away, maybe stop praying, or when you're just nurturing this bitterness, holding a grudge against him. That's when a healthy struggle can turn into something spiritually dangerous.
Now, let's go a layer deeper, because to really understand why we're so hurt, we have to start digging up the hidden expectations that are fueling the whole thing in the first place. So much of our disappointment comes from these, let's call them unspoken contracts. They're these subtle internal deals we make with God, usually without even knowing we're doing it. God, if I do my part, then surely you'll do your part. The problem is, when God doesn't hold up his end of a bargain he never actually agreed to, we feel completely betrayed.
And these broken contracts, they usually show up in one of four areas. Maybe it's about timing. His delay feels like a flat-out no. Or it's his method. He answers the prayer, but not in the way we mapped out. Maybe it's the outcome. It's just not the ending we wrote in our heads. Or sometimes it's just our interpretation of it all. Figuring out which of these is hitting you is a huge step.
So, given all this, where do we go from here? I mean, what do you actually do with this feeling? The goal isn't just to get through disappointment, it's to actually let it become a tool that forges a deeper, more resilient faith. This is about moving from understanding the problem to finding a practical way forward.
Here's a really helpful 4-step path to walk. First, name it honestly. Just tell God the absolute truth about how you feel. Don't hold back. Second, keep showing up. Persist in prayer. Keep going to church, especially when you don't feel like it. Third, rehearse truth. Anchor yourself in what you know is true about God's character from Scripture, not just what your circumstances are screaming at you. And finally, and this is the hardest one, surrender the need to understand. Choose to trust him anyway.
When you get right down to it, disappointment isn't a dead end. It's a crossroads. It's a decision point that can change the whole trajectory of your spiritual life.
That pain can make you pull back, build walls around your heart, and let your faith just shrink into something small and cynical. Or, if you can walk through it with honesty and grit, it can become the very thing that deepens your trust in a way that a life of ease and comfort never, ever could.
This whole journey, really, is about making a profound shift. It's about moving away from a faith that's based on getting the right outcomes to a faith that's based on the trustworthiness of God's character, even when the outcomes make no sense. It's the huge difference between trusting His hands and trusting His heart.
And that brings us to maybe the most powerful shift of all. It's changing the central question we ask. Instead of demanding, why did this happen? We can learn to ask, God, what are you forming in me through this? Moving from a demand for an explanation to a posture of formation, well, that opens the door for God to do His deepest work, turning our greatest points of pain into our most profound sources of strength.